to Kennore's Business Growth webinar series. This morning's webinar is on fulfillment strategies for SMEs. So today we'll explore the critical role fulfillment plays in driving e-commerce growth, from deciding when to outsource to 3PL to knowing what to expect from the right partner. This session will cover key strategies for optimizing operations, avoiding common pitfalls, and expanding into new markets. So, first of all, I'll introduce Knorr. We're a firm of over 75 staff specializing in offering compliance and business support services, outsourced bookkeeping, payroll, and management accounts. We're a multi award winning online accountancy and company secretarial firm supporting SMEs across Ireland and the UK. This morning's expert guests are Fiachra Murphy, Sales Manager at Autofulfill. So Autofulfill is an Irish e-commerce fulfillment centre supporting online direct-to-consumer retail brands from around the world. And Fiachra works closely with a wide range of growing online retailers to help them scale through smarter logistics. With hands-on experience in third-party logistics space, he brings a deep understanding of when it makes sense for e-commerce business to outsource the fulfillment. So no better man to be on helping us today. I'm also joined by Tom Francis, Head of Accounting at Knorr. So Tom manages a large portfolio of accountants and bookkeepers who support our clients across a broad range of industries. He takes the view of your accountant should be a strategic partner and works closely with our large and scaling businesses. Now, it is important to note that the webinar is for general information purposes only. For specific advice, we always recommend reaching out directly to an expert, and we'll share Tom and Fiachra's contact details at the end of the webinar. That being said, Fiachra and Tom are happy to take questions and would like to see interaction from you throughout. So please use the chat or question and answer feature, and I'll pose your questions to them on your behalf. My name's Christina McGreevy. I'm Head of Sales and Marketing here at Knorr, and I'll be your host today and help to navigate any questions. So please do engage. And I'll hand over to Fiachra now to get started. So good morning.
All right. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction. Yeah, so as Christina mentioned, I'm the sales manager here at Autofulfill, and going to speak a little bit to the question of, is your fulfillment strategy helping or hindering your e-commerce growth? Okay, so just a little bit about Autofulfill. I know Christina gave us a nice introduction there, but just to add a little bit to that. So we're one of the longer standing 3PLs in Ireland. We've been actively helping Irish kind of e-commerce companies grow since 2013. Got a bit of a unique background in that we were actually built by e-commerce retailers. And yeah, so we're based in Oranmore, County Galway, where we have a 100,000 square foot facility. We also have a satellite facility in Sheffield in the UK. And yeah, our customers tend to very much like our service. We're rated 9.1 out of 10 by them. And we're, interestingly, Ireland's first carbon neutral fulfillment centre, which is a rare boasting point in the logistics sector in general. So just to give a brief rundown of some of the subjects I'm hoping to cover today. So I'm going to be talking kind of broadly about the role of fulfillment in e-commerce growth, customer expectations and operational impact, a little bit about in-house versus outsourced fulfillment, what to expect from a good 3PL, third-party logistics, some common pitfalls to avoid, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about some strategic use cases before opening up the floor to any questions. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to start with the role of fulfillment in e-commerce growth. So when I say fulfillment, I'm not just talking about kind of packing boxes and slapping on a label. We're talking about everything that happens after someone places an order. So that includes stock allocation, pick and pack, delivery, returns, and in many ways, the customer service moments that are tied to these steps. So by the time you're ready to send someone their order, you've already run the gauntlets of product development, prototypes, marketing. After all of that effort, fulfillment is the final impression that a customer gets, and how effective or ineffective it is will shape the customer's perception of your brand. So really, do I summarize this by saying fulfillment is where your brand's promise meets reality. You can have the best marketing, but if orders are consistently arriving late or wrong, then customer experience and retention tend to suffer massively. When fulfillment is clunky, it creates a lot of friction everywhere else in the business. You know, marketing campaigns have to slow down because operations can't keep up, or maybe your team is burning hours, putting out fires, and overall it just kind of causes companies to lose momentum. If you're running a growing brand, you've probably felt this. Maybe your marketing's ready to scale, demand is building, but because your back end can't keep up, it just becomes an issue. And that gap between growth and fulfillment is where a lot of stress lives, and where a lot of opportunities get blocked. But that being said, when fulfillment works and works well, it really becomes a growth engine. It allows you to be a lot more flexible about running flash sales, testing new SKUs, marketplaces, things like that. So, on to the subject of customer expectations. They're ever changing, but there's been plenty of research done into this recently.
April,
So,
and
yes,
just
go ahead.
can I just jump in before you jump over to that section? I
Absolutely.
think the point you've made there around, I suppose, yeah, the importance of fulfillment, whether it's the 3PL or internal fulfillment in e-commerce growth, it's almost a growth enabler to a point because if you can do it and do it well, as you said, it leaves that really good impression. Like I mean, from dealing with our own clients who engage with fulfillment partners, and particularly we see like a client who's involved in international sales, um, and I know that they were struggling themselves in getting that product to the end customer. Um, and in bringing in a 3PL, delivery times were slashed. Actually, they were actually more than halved. And obviously, there's cost benefit as well. You don't have to have the dedicated warehouse space or people. So I suppose in that regard, then would you see that as having a 3PL as being a growth enabler for the clients that you guys work with?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, having
Mm,
the right 3PL is a huge growth enabler. It allows companies to keep their headcounts lean. Now, that being said, there are a lot of companies who fulfill themselves and they do a really good job of it. But for the most part, with brands, fulfillment isn't necessarily the thing that gives them their edge. It's just something that has to
yeah.
work smoothly. And working with a 3PL gives a lot of advantages on that front because you don't need the expertise internally. If you find the right partner, you plug in, you can benefit from their infrastructure, their expertise, everything else.
It's almost an expectation like that, I have the Amazon effect in my head where I order today and I get it, tomorrow or the day after. Um, you don't want to, your customers don't want to kind of meet that basic expectation. And it's only when it doesn't work, it affects the customer experience in many ways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
It's
Yeah,
actually
without a doubt.
feeds nicely into some of the points here around customer expectations.
yeah.
So, recent research done on this shows that most shoppers today are expecting delivery within 2 to 3 days as standard. And that's, from clicking purchase to the parcel arriving in their hands.
Mhm.
And if we look at other markets, that is very rapidly trending towards next day delivery because of some of those marketplaces you mentioned, Tom, like Amazon,
Mm.
TikTok is a huge one. So, but the main thing is it's not just about being fast, it's also about being reliable. So, generally speaking, people would rather a 3 day delivery that arrives on time consistently every time, rather than the promise of next day delivery that is rarely met. It's a very quick way to break trust that way. And as anyone in the e-commerce space knows, once trust is broken with customers, it's very hard to win back. The thing to remember is that with e-commerce, especially since the pandemic, when this whole sector evolved massively, you're not just selling products; you are selling the entire experience around it, and fulfillment plays a huge role in that. So, there's research to show that about like 98% of online shoppers say the delivery experience will affect whether they will shop with a brand again. And 84% of those won't return after just one bad experience. And that's huge. Um, so, what it really adds up to is that fulfillment, it's not just an operational necessity, it's more of a customer experience tool. If it's working well, it helps you win repeated business. But if not, you could be losing customers before you even realize there's a problem. Uh, to the next part and how that ties into your operations. So, So behind the scenes fulfillment tends to be if one of the most, if not the most resource intensive part of any e-commerce operation. And you could be fulfilling orders yourself out of a room in your house, or maybe you've even got a small warehouse crew. Regardless, someone is spending hours every day picking, packing, chasing couriers, processing returns, managing stock, everything else. It's like even for smaller brands, fulfillment tends to eat up at least one person's full workload. And as
Yeah.
volume grows, it can become a bottleneck very quickly. And this is kind of again going back to some of the points you made, Tom. It goes back to how getting fulfillment right is not just about customer experience. It's also about freeing up your own time, your own headspace, your capacity internally to kind of focus on growth.
That's so important, isn't it, Fiona? Because even, from the other point of view, we are always saying about remove those like admin tasks from your desk, so that you can focus on growing the business. So one of our core services is that we provide outsourced bookkeeping to businesses, and that's really to do the very same thing, to remove them from that admin side and that admin burden of the business. And even as you say, it's not just the actual packing and the physical element of that and the cost of storage, but even the admin of emailing a customer, keeping them up to date, tracking with tracking codes and all of that, and the customer service element of that it must be so labor intensive when you're not working with someone that's just streamlining it and regularly updating your customer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've spoken with so many different founders who were kind of entertaining outsourcing, but were maybe kind of clinging on to the process.
Right.
I've had video calls with them where they were actually packing boxes while I was speaking to them
Yeah.
from their kitchen or a room in their house or
That's
something.
it.
Yeah, it happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
And to Christina's point, like in outsourcing, it could be the bookkeeping, it could be your 3PL, whatever it might be. It's those tasks that take the business owner or the team away from doing what they do best,
Yeah.
which could be the selling or or whatever else that might be.
Yeah.
So it just for me that feels like it makes sense. You're removing, as Christina also said, it was kind of that non-value add tasks almost where they're not really, they're taking you away. So I like from that, what it will bring from that point of view.
Mhm.
Mm.
Perfect. Yeah. So onto that subject then. So I want to speak a little bit about in-house versus outsourced fulfillment, kind
Right.
of
Great.
when and why you should outsource.
I was just going to ask when, so it's great
Yeah,
that you're coming to
me
this,
too.
because it's so important, at what stage does a business need to move? Do they have to have a steady stream of monthly income? So I'm sure you're going to cover it. It'd be great to see.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, I am going to speak to the advantages of outsourcing quite a bit, just a heads up. But that's the world I work in, and I regularly see firsthand how transformative it can be. That said, outsourcing isn't a universal solution. It's definitely not the only way forward, but really what matters most is recognizing when your current setup, be that in-house or outsourced, needs some attention. Maybe it's holding you back a little bit. And the main kind of indicators for that are, firstly, as we kind of spoke about there, maybe you're spending more time on fulfillment than the rest of your business. To be honest, that's probably not why you started your e-commerce business. So, if you're finding that, your house is starting to fill up with boxes or your space is just getting too full, maybe you're spending all day packing boxes, answering kind of customer service emails, everything else, might be time to consider switching up. Other ones that have order volumes are kind of getting hard to manage. Maybe mistakes are starting to creep in, or late deliveries, or complaints, or even bad reviews. Another big one for a lot of e-commerce brands is staffing, simply because of the so many different sectors in the space are really seasonal, which can make staffing a nightmare. Maybe your order volumes are far too inconsistent to staff effectively, and it just means that at the end of every year, that predictable peak season that everyone hits becomes a nightmare. And then the last one of the biggest ones, of course, is if you are looking to expand internationally. Logistics can become a bit of a headache, kind of navigating things like customs, duties, delivery times. It's a lot. The bottom line is that if your fulfillment has stopped adding value and is now slowing you down, it's probably time to hand it off to someone who can do it faster, better, more efficiently. So that said, there are a lot of companies who will hold on to it for as long as possible, which is understandable. It's an important part of your business to trust in someone else's hand. But more often than that, one of the biggest reasons I see brands delay outsourcing is the cost. It's completely understandable because, on paper, if you're keeping it in house, that's always going to look cheaper because you're not paying someone else to do it. So, you must be saving, right? But what we also see time and time again is that those savings disappear once you kind of factor in hidden costs. So
Okay.
let's say, for example, your setup isn't optimized, and for most growing brands, that's the case. Mistakes start to happen. Orders going out inaccurately, scans are missed. You'll find, very quickly that you're paying more and more for reshipping or refunds, or spending more of your time on support tickets. And the other thing to remember that is that comes with a cost to your brand's reputation as well. And as reputation drops, retention tends to drop alongside it. Now, you might currently have a setup that's working. You could be operating from a small space, but once growth really starts coming into the brand, you will hit a ceiling both physically and operationally. What works?
And Fikra, it's probably the scaling impact as well. Like, so what got me here is great. But if I want to scale this, I ain't going to be able to do this myself in my front room, or, ourselves generally as a business. We gotta get the experts in. So that always just jumps out at me, that scaling piece.
Exactly. Yeah. So doing it yourself, it's like what works at 20 orders a day breaks at 200. So the thing that I usually say is to people when they're comparing 3PL costs is, it's not just a question of what will a 3PL charge you. You also have to ask what your current setup is already costing you in terms of not just money, but time and opportunity. And then speaking then to the main kind of benefits of working with a 3PL, these are the things you should expect if you work with one. So first, naturally, it's time. Outsourcing, you're buying back your hours. You're not kind of, packing orders at 9 p.m. at night and answering customer emails. You kind of get to go back to the things you set up your business for. You can focus on growth or new product or marketing, whatever you prefer. Next, a big one, especially when brands are experiencing high growth, is accuracy. So the thing to remember with 3PLs is that things like same day dispatch and high kind of pick accuracy, their whole organizations are built around maximizing those at any order volume. They're completely geared towards that. Your average kind of scaling e-commerce brand, generally speaking, is not. And of course, that kind of speaks to the infrastructure then. So, personally, every year, like clockwork, around kind of Black Friday or in the build up to Christmas, I'm hearing from brands that just cannot keep up. Maybe they've run out of space, or they don't have the staff to kind of deal with it. Again, a 3PL has that capacity. You can double your order volume without having to double your team or change your operation setup. And then, of course, this kind of it's kind of implied by everything else, but it allows you to keep a lot of operational simplicity. You don't need to build out large internal operations teams. You can keep your headcount lean. Helps kind of reduce distractions for your team as it is.
Yeah. And Fiacre, you're so right here, because 100% founders and business owners don't necessarily in the early stages value their own time, right? And it's that measurement of you were really to balance out that cost of you spending so much time busy in the operations and not adding value to the business, where removing them there is that they get to focus on the business, exactly as you say. That's so important. And keeping your team lean, particularly in an e-commerce business where there is seasonality, I'm sure is just so important as well. And I know, Tom, you would have directed clients in the past to do that. So it all just makes sense. One thing that I keep sort of coming into my mind is, do you have to have sort of a base level of orders per month, that you're going into this? Or can you sort of like scale into this thinking, okay, I'm expecting so many orders in the Christmas season, but then it's going to go down? Like, talk to us about that, I suppose, Fiacre.
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends on the partner and where your business is at. So for most brands, they don't necessarily for most brands, the business, what's actually coming in will tell you when you need fulfillment, when it starts to feel overwhelming. I mean,
Okay.
a lot of brands, if they're handling, I don't know, maybe 5 orders a day, 10 orders a day, that's absolutely manageable.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
then what happens so often is, maybe someone's working with an influencer or one of their
Mm.
products gets a lot of attention. Suddenly that order volume kind of triples, quadruples. A good kind of baseline, because with any fulfillment center you get more value the more volume you have. Most of us kind of will base our rates on order volumes as being the most important kind of important factor. As a
Okay.
general baseline, I would recommend maybe exploring outsourcing fulfillment when your volumes are kind of consistently over the 100 200 mark, things like that.
Okay. Okay.
But that being said, there are a lot of different fulfillment centers have their focus on a lot of different parts of the market. Some of them like really love working with startups. Some of them are much more interested in kind of more established brands. Obviously, if anyone has any questions like that, if anyone's at that stage, you're free to reach out to me after this webinar, and we can talk. But yeah,
Okay. Great. Thanks for that, Fiacre. Sorry, it was just a burning question. I'll let you carry on.
no problem. So going back to one thing Tom mentioned earlier is the link between fulfillment and scalability. I mentioned before that outsourcing isn't necessarily a requirement for scaling. A lot of brands do it in-house and do it brilliantly. And maybe if fulfillment is core to your value proposition, maybe you're in the fast fashion space or something similar. If you have the volume and the margins and you're willing to make the investments to support it, then keeping fulfillment in-house is absolutely viable. The thing to remember is that it does come with limits. You're always going to be capped by space, time, headcount. Growth adds pressure very quickly. And eventually you may still need to make that heavy investment in kind of technology like a warehouse management system, or maybe a larger space. Like, the real question shouldn't be, should I outsource? The real question is, what is going to help me scale most efficiently without losing focus on the business? That's really where the decision lies, and that's often why a lot of brands decide that outsourcing is the way forward.
Fibra.
Yeah.
So to kind of push on from that point, then speaking with my clients day in, day out, fulfillment does come in, and the word outsourcing comes up. And by the way, I suppose outsourcing anything, it could be the fulfillment, but it could be any part of the business. Um, Business owners sometimes worry about, I suppose, losing control a little bit. So losing
Yeah.
control of the process. Am I going to be, disconnected in some way, shape, or form from ops or the customer experience? And I'm sure that's something, that you guys probably hear as well along the way. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I find it entirely understandable. There's a lot of work that goes into building an e-commerce brand to the point where outsourcing fulfillment is, something that they should really be considering. Um, and handing that vital part of the business to another partner, it really demands a lot of trust, because
Yeah,
you're freeing up your own time. Maybe you're getting a bit
yeah,
more quality of life back from it, but you're also essentially handing the baby to someone else. There are a few ways to kind of identify, a good 3PL. There's a kind of some red flags, there are some green flags, so to speak. Actually, that feeds really nicely into the next section. So, yeah, I can speak a little bit to this. A lot of fulfillment centers, if you're looking into the market, will look the same on the surface. I mean, we all offer the same kind of core services, but usually it's when you start working with someone that the difference between good and great becomes apparent. So there's three things that you should always look out for when speaking with a fulfillment center. The first one is how transparent their pricing schedule is. Ireland, like I said, Ireland might be small, but there's no shortage of fulfillment centers. One of the most common frustrations I hear from founders at every stage is that fulfillment center quotes are so heavily itemized that it's really quite hard to figure out what you'll actually spend every month. Most providers, when you're speaking with them, will give you a really neat kind of a cost per order estimate, but it's a little bit of a pitfall because very often I've seen that those will only cover the absolute basics like pick,
Yeah.
pack, and shipping. What they don't include are the standing kind of ad hoc costs that most brands will incur. Things like barcoding, goods receiving, storage, kitting, things like that. So the first thing is to look out for is that if you are comparing providers, don't just look at the headline rate. You should always ask for a potential breakdown of all potential charges. So it helps you model a realistic monthly scenario.
And it helps you budget as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because like
True.
understanding that pricing model, yeah, the cost per order could be the cheapest you can see, but it's, as you said, it's the hidden cost. It could be the storage, the receiving, the returns, whatever that might be. So in order to budget effectively, and mind the margins as well, because I suppose we actually talked about cost a lot so far, and many business owners will want to kind of protect the margin, and this is 101 of protecting margins, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a hugely
Mm.
important decision. But when you're speaking with fulfillment centers and you're asking them for a breakdown of all these costs, a good fulfillment center will actually work on this with you and kind of help you calculate all of this. Bad ones, generally speaking, will just hope that you don't ask.
Yeah,
The next thing then to look out for is the tech stack integration. So when people talk about tech integrations with fulfillment centers, they're usually thinking of, can it connect to my Shopify store, my WooCommerce store? And to be fair, the vast majority of providers have things like that locked down. Really not an issue. The real kind of game changer when it comes to tech is the client portal. So working with a fulfillment center, you'll usually get some kind of like software portal that allows you to, look at your inventory, manage orders, things like that. Some of them are really modern and intuitive, and they give you kind of live data on inventory levels. But some of them look like throwbacks to the noughties. So if you're speaking with a fulfillment center, don't ignore the portal. It's not something very often you won't ever see a fulfillment portal until you've already agreed to work with them. So if you're speaking with one, ask for a demo of the portal. You want to know, if you can see live stock levels. You want to know
mm.
if you can edit or cancel orders easily. And this is where you get back some of that control.
Control. Yeah, I was just thinking that for Fikr actually, as you're saying it, having a good portal, you can see the dashboard, you can see, as you said, you can see the flow of the orders, I suppose the time it's taken, the cancellation, as you said it there as well. And I think certainly for me, that would definitely put my mind at ease if you have a portal that's strong enough and good enough to kind of give you that the live data, but and the reassurance as well that the flow is going pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Mm,
like, even if everything is running smoothly in your warehouse, your experience kind of lives and dies by the quality of the portal. It's not just about what's happening behind the scenes. It's really about how easily your team can actually interact with that process. The next thing to always look out for then is just a kind of operational support. So this is a bit of a catch-all term. But it's probably the most felt aspect of working with a fulfillment center. So a good fulfillment center will be proactive. They will flag low stock with you before it becomes a problem. They can help you kind of prep for campaigns, like if you do a lot of volume on Black Friday or something like that. Like they'll always be proactively spotting issues, usually before you do, and communication is good. So like a good fulfillment center should feel like an extension of your team. It shouldn't feel so much like you are giving up control. The
yeah,
communication should be there. You want a fulfillment center that's in your corner, not one that's going to create more problems or worse still, kind of disappear when things get busy.
yeah. Because it's one thing having that portal and having all the real-time data and all the flashing things and graphs and tables, but it might be the blind spots as well. Like maybe you don't check the portal on Monday
Yeah,
morning and you don't check it till Tuesday or Monday evening. And there could be a problem, and you need someone to own it and to raise it, not just wait for you to come to them as well. So it's a two-way street.
exactly.
Mm,
Okay. And I guess
yeah.
that feeds nicely into kind of avoiding common pitfalls. So This section is really about kind of the things that can trip you up, not just operationally, but financially. There's a lot of kind of common blind spots that I've seen when brands start working with 3PLs. And these are the kinds of issues that will eat into your margins. They can frustrate your team or even worse, like even kind of impact the customer experience. There's a few key areas. One is just understanding SKU complexity and how that affects costs. Then it's about kind of locking in rates and service levels, and then a little bit about international fulfillment. So starting with SKU complexity. One of the most misunderstood costs in fulfillment is goods receiving. Every fulfillment center have their own structure. You know, some of them will quote cost per pallet, some of them will quote a cost per kind of master carton. Underneath all of that, they're all effectively charging for the same thing, and that's time. The more time it takes to unpack, kind of check in, store your stock, the more you're going to end up paying. And goods in for something that can, on surface level, appear such a small part of working with a fulfillment center can be massively expensive if your business isn't optimized. So, you know, if deliveries are arriving unscheduled, if everything is unlabeled, you've got mixed kind of SKUs or, you know, mixed product categories all in the one box, you're going to drive up your own costs massively. You know, it slows everything down in the process, in the warehouse, and kind of clogs up the whole operation. Best ways to avoid this is always pre-label all of your SKUs or product categories very clearly. Use packing slips. Again, also going back to communication, you know, let your fulfillment partner know exactly what is coming and when. And most importantly, by far the biggest issue with goods in that I've gotten from speaking with founders is barcode everything. This isn't just important for fulfillment centers. This is also crucial if you want to look into kind of the wholesale sales channel. Um, without barcodes, accuracy drops through the floor. Inventory becomes a guessing game, and usually, you know, your fulfillment center is going to end up charging you more to fix that. Most fulfillment centers will actually insist on barcodes, and for good reason. And if they don't, that's often a red flag.
And
That's really
I'm a
interesting.
I'm a an SME, and I'm, you know, a bit green around the ears a little bit, and I barcodes, like, you know, I'm just thinking, oh Jesus, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I need to be kind of ready as well before I go working with a 3PL, but at the same time though, where do I go? Like how do I make a, you know, how do I get a barcode? Do I need this, you know, do I need some inventory system, you know? So there's probably a bit of homework to do as well before you kind of, you want to be able to walk before you can run a little bit, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
thankfully, barcodes, they're not actually, when once you get into it, they're not really difficult or expensive to set up, but it's just that most founders
Yeah.
kind of don't think of it, you know, especially if you've been
yes,
fulfilling yourself.
yes,
Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
when it goes to a warehouse, I mean, everything, you're going into a heavily kind of automated environment where they're using technology to make sure that all of those service levels, like accuracy, same day fulfillment, that they are
yeah.
met consistently. All of those processes rely on technology, and that's where barcodes come into play.
So, so I'm sure then with autofulfill, if a prospect came to you and you asked them those basic questions, is the bar, you know, the barcodes, whatever, you know, the SKUs, anything like that that needs to be kind of be in place for things to run efficiently, for it to run at all, but then to run efficiently on a cost basis as well. You kind of be able to guide whether they're ready, you're ready for 3PL, or you need to do X, Y, and Z before you're ready for the, you know, to get in the door.
Yeah, exactly. We
Yeah,
uh, we work with a lot of kind of brands at the early stages of growth,
yeah,
and as many of my calls are focused on kind of helping companies transition into our fulfillment center, as there are ones where I'm just giving people guidance because maybe they're not quite at that stage yet, but
correct.
just helping them prepare for, you know, for that kind of growth stage when they're ready to outsource, making sure that all their ducks are in a line. I actually really
Mhm.
enjoy those calls. All right. Okay, so from here, where was I? Apologies.
Sorry
Yes,
about
That's
that.
scaling
fine.
secure pricing. This is probably the most important slide in this section.
Okay.
Um, so When you're reviewing a proposal or any whatever kind of agreement with a fulfillment center, it's always crucial to remember that you're probably looking at the best case scenario pricing. So, usually the process goes your first conversation with a fulfillment center, they'll ask you a lot of questions like what's your order volume, how many different SKUs you have. And in my experience, most people are always optimistic about their order volume. And that's great, but then you get a quote that assumes that you will hit those projected volumes regularly. Question here is what happens if you don't? A lot of fulfillment centers will reprice mid-contract if your order volumes are underperforming. On the flip side, if you're overperforming, a lot of 3PLs will reduce your rates, but some of them, especially if it's happening significantly during peak seasons, they may not be operationally kind of prepared, and they may end up deprioritizing you compared to other clients who have more consistent volumes. So when you're at that stage with a fulfillment center, it's really important to ask the right questions. So, are my rates locked in? What happens if volumes fluctuate? And whatever is agreed, always make sure that you get it in writing. Now, fluctuating order volumes are absolutely not uncommon in the e-commerce space. We have a client called Box Ballin who sell these little kind of novelty boxing games that you can connect to your phone. Anyway, they're a bit of fun, but they do huge volume, but 95% of their orders happen in the last 6 weeks of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. We kind of forget about them for 11 months of the year, and then Christmas comes and they're just everywhere in the warehouse. But it's, as again, this is kind of communication is key. When we were speaking with them initially, we they let us know that that was going to be the case, and we were able to adjust things accordingly to make sense for them.
Okay.
Always crucial to have those conversations and understand what your fulfillment center is going to be about. In that sense, it's as important for you to set their expectations as it is for them to set yours. So yes, always get any kind of agreements around price changes in writing. This also includes SLAs or service levels, things like same day dispatch, pick accuracy, response times during peak season. You don't want to get lost in a ticketing system that can take 2-3 days to get a response from if you've got an urgent problem.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a lot of different founders who, they started working with a fulfillment center. They've had a flawless experience for the first few months, and then Q4 hits and everything collapses. So it's just important not to let that happen to yourself. Make sure everything with SLAs and pricing is on paper, and that way you've got something to hold your partner accountable with.
And Fiona, we've had a question come in. Are returns and reverse orders logistics usually priced separately, and how should I budget for them?
Oh, that's an important question. So
Mm,
it's important to get a good understanding of what your returns rate is. Now, depending on what stage you're at, you might not know yet. So
okay.
a good way to start is just to understand what it is in your own particular vertical. So, if you're a fashion brand,
Okay.
you've probably got a return rate of around 10%, whereas if you're in the supplement space, it's much lower than that. Most fulfillment centers will give you a couple of different options when it comes to returns. So on the immediate front, yeah, they can, they'll handle the product and they'll act as you want with them. How much that costs depends on how involved the process is. For some products, obviously, if you're in the ambient food space, if you get a return, you probably just need it destroyed.
Mhm.
That's a lot less expensive than if you're in fashion and an item needs to be inspected, maybe refolded, resealed in something. So that side of things, it kind of just depends on what you need. Then the
Okay.
other question with returns, though, is who pays for the shipping of that return? Should it be the customer or should it be yourself?
Mhm.
A lot of fulfillment centers will plug in with services like Loop or OnPost, Click and Send, I think it's called.
Okay.
These are services that allow you to essentially offer your customers shipping labels. It obviously
Okay.
makes for a much
Free.
smoother customer experience, but it comes with a little bit of a cost.
Mhm.
You just need to understand beforehand, exactly what you want to offer your customers and what you expect from your 3PL.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and to budget for that cost accordingly, right? That's helpful. Thank you, Fiacre.
No problem. Actually, it's feds into return.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Good timing.
Yeah, indeed.
So returns and international expansion could probably make up their own webinar, but at a very high level, here's
Mm,
just a few things to be aware of. So from the international perspective, if, for most Irish brands, when they're expanding and they reach a certain point, the next logical step is to expand into the UK. So it's always good to remember and be prepared for that, though. And my co-host here at Kenora can advise you very thoroughly on this subject.
Yeah.
Expanding into the UK comes with a few hurdles around VAT registration, EORI registration, customs returns, duties. Now, if your order volume justifies it, expanding into the UK is absolutely a great growth opportunity. It could be that you could entertain working with a UK-based 3PL, or maybe your Irish 3PL already has a warehouse in the UK. But yeah, obviously working with a UK fulfillment center massively helps you speed up delivery. You get to
Yeah.
benefit from local shipping rates, and you can avoid customs related friction.
And I suppose on that note, actually, it's fair to say that when using a 3PL, like don't assume that things like the VAT and the customs and all that kind of tax piece is being looked after. That could be your downfall, because I think often, more often than not, you need to work with a customs agent around the import export. It definitely, your accountant or tax person will definitely be able to look after any registrations around the VAT or the EORI, no problem. The reporting part, but it's I think it's the physical movement of the goods, and that paperwork. You really need to be working with a customs agent as well. That be fair, Fiacre?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a very kind of commonly misunderstood area when people come to me. So generally speaking, I mean, there are some fulfillment centers that will offer to act as, things like importer of record, but we don't do that. We try to keep away from that side of things. I don't think it's advisable because like there are kind of, like I mentioned, there are fulfillment centers that do this, but the problem is now your international growth is dependent on this particular partner. You're kind of locked in with them.
yeah,
If they bring up their rates, you're kind of stuck. You either leave the market or you just kind of suck it up and take those. We always advise that people kind of try and get ahead of these things before they actually expand. It should be part of your
yeah.
strategy ahead of the time, not after the fact.
And there's a customer experience part of this as well, aside from a tax part, and it's like it could be the delivery time, the delays at borders. It could be, am I getting a bill for duties at the door with the postman? So it's kind of there's a lot actually at play there in that one point on your slide. So I think
Yeah.
good things to yeah. And as you said, there's a separate webinar on that all day long. But for here, I think, yeah, it's just I think the awareness that making that assumption could be a faulty one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Um, it's a tricky one to navigate, but obviously international expansion, if you get it right, is an enormous growth opportunity. But it's just important to plan ahead for these things and not to make these decisions, as I often see from different vendors, on a kind of a willy-nilly basis.
Yeah. You're
Um,
you're so right though, Tom. That impact of getting that bill to the door is just such a negative experience, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
if you're not set up properly, there's no point almost in going into that market because to speak to what you've mentioned earlier, Fiacre, it's brand damaging in some cases. We actually have a question on that as well that's just come in. How can I test the UK market before fully committing? Can a 3PL support partial or trial based expansion?
the issue with working with a local 3PL in another country that you want to expand in is as soon as they're storing your goods, then that
Mm,
kind of constitutes a taxable presence.
mm,
Honestly, what I see from our own clients is they'll kind of just fulfill from Ireland into the UK, for example, if we're just
mm.
looking at those two countries.
Yeah.
Naturally, yes, that can result in duties landing on the customer's doorstep. the best way or the only way around that is just being fully transparent with customers. Some brands will actually offer to refund the customer afterwards if they provide proof of it, but that is a little bit of a clunky process. It adds a lot of manual steps. It's up to you. Obviously, it's an option, but really, it's best to kind of have a little better idea of what your order volumes are going to look like before you go into a market. Another option, of course, is through wholesale, if that's an option for your brand. Naturally, because the ownership of the goods will be with the wholesaler as opposed to yourself. So you kind of dodging that kind of dodging is the wrong word to use, but you're avoiding kind of that taxable presence thing. But it's a tricky one to balance. You kind of want to have a good idea of what your success rates are going to be before spreading in, really, because a lot of fulfillment centers, they don't like trials. They want people who will stay with them
They
for
want
at
commitment.
least a year. Yeah.
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 There's something in my mind about using a Northern Ireland based fulfillment center as well, as opposed to someone on mainland UK because of the whole EU link between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Mm.
So just something to bear in mind. We won't go into it now, but so I had I was working with a client recently, and this actually came up. So don't assume you have to go mainland UK with 3PL. You could go Northern Ireland and then bring it from Northern Ireland to UK, so it could be an option.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm.
Okay. So on to my next slide. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some kind of strategic use cases. So
Great.
when most people think about scaling, it's rarely just about doing more of the same. Usually it's about, launching something new, maybe a new marketplace, new country. When that happens, fulfillment typically becomes a bit of a bottleneck. But if you're working with the right partner, then they're going to give you the infrastructure and flexibility to go about this without having to rebuild everything underneath you. So I just want to talk in this section about a couple of little real world scenarios where outsourcing fulfillment has helped brands. The first one then is, if I can get this to change, operational flexibility and seasonal scaling. So we started working with a client a couple of years ago. Might be well known in Ireland, called Torpy. They're a hurling manufacturer. Famous, they're the first company that made those bamboo hurleys to deal
Yeah.
with the problem with ash trees. So they have an amazing operation. I've seen it a few times. They've got a shop tied to manufacturing and at the time also fulfillment. Their order volumes were scaling kind of very quickly. Obviously, it's a well-known brand. They're used by a lot of kind of GAA kind of senior players. And the issue is that as fulfillment was growing, it was pulling people off the manufacturing floor, off the shop front to go in and try and meet this. And so like I said, it became a bottleneck for the whole business. They kind of were hesitant to work with a fulfillment center because they have a lot of value-added services for their customers. So, for example, they don't just send you, the raw hurley. They'll always give you a choice of what color kind of wrapping you want on it, and they'll wrap it for you. That made it much more difficult to outsource. So when we spoke with them, there was a lot of conversations about understanding how important that is to their brand. They were they actually showed some of our operatives how to do it to their standard. And thankfully, they were ultimately able to outsource that part of the business to us. It has freed up their organization so much. They can kind of focus on kind of maintaining the quality in their hurls, which, if anyone knows the brand, is exceptionally high. They always want to kind of protect that. And it's just made their lives a lot easier, especially especially at the start of every GAA season when the orders come flying in. But yeah, so like for most brands like them, sales don't stay steady. They'll spike during product launches, holidays, everything else. And if you're handling this in house like Torpy, you're probably scrambling to maybe even hire temporary staff to get through these things. With a fulfillment center, you are already tapping into an existing scalable workforce with proven systems who can handle these spikes in volume.
You know, Fiacre, I love that story because it speaks to the fact that whether it's the little boxing games thing that you mentioned that gets shipped at Christmas, like as a stocking filler, right through to a luxury product that cares about the quality of their packaging, cares about how someone opens it and wants to have that customizable experience, but also have it be scaled. And the fact that you can sort of adapt and support a business that's at that early stage or even has products in that smaller space and that sort of like the word escapes me or the word that, that I won't use, but then to the right through to the luxury space,
Yeah,
then that's massive for any growing business, that has an entry level product right through to a luxury product. You're able to provide them with those two very different experiences, but also able to support. And I'm sure sort of stepping into working with the fulfillment center for that brand, it was about building up trust and confidence that you guys wouldn't drop their quality or their standard, right?
exactly. And
Yeah.
they were actually very smart about it. I should have mentioned earlier. With Torpy, I went over to see their operation. They showed me everything from the start of the process right to the end. Not just the fulfillment side. And that was great because I was aware of the brand before, but I
Mm,
appreciated them a lot more after it, how
of course.
much they emphasize quality in what they do, how mature the actual process was. And
Yeah.
fulfillment was the only thing that was dragging that operation down.
Right.
Also, they had multiple visits to our warehouse. They wanted to make sure that everything was right, that they were as confident in our operation as they were in their own, just to make sure that our processes were right. Like with them, there was a lot of talk beforehand because they have really special needs with their goods.
Right.
This was news to me, but obviously they're experts. So for example, hurls should never be stored lying down because apparently that actually makes the wood warp. So we actually adjusted a section of the warehouse to handle their hurls specifically to keep them hung. But it's a lot of that kind of building trust and showing
Mhm.
flexibility that kind of made them take the step into actually outsourcing this part of the business. And I think it's been really good for
Right.
them. They've been able to, as whereas before fulfillment was the main cap on their e-commerce sales volumes, now it's manufacturing. So as long as they can make them, they can sell them.
And
Great.
you said it there though, trust actually, because we've actually come full circle. I think back to that control piece. Like I want to
Yeah.
control, but how can my customers trust me to deliver if I don't trust my 3PL, or my actually my strategy, whether it's in-house or not, there has
Mhm.
to be trust along the way. So I think for me that's probably a big part of it is I trust my team, or I trust my 3PL.
Yeah.
But if something's not working there, you really need to address it internally or externally.
For sure.
Mm.
That's it. And actually, we do have a question that was submitted as well, Fiacre, and I know you've covered control a little, but how can I maintain visibility and control over operations after outsourcing fulfillment? So just in case
There
we have a
are
strategic case.
two things. One is the thing I mentioned earlier about the client portal.
Yeah.
If you're outsourcing, make sure that that is up to scratch. Like if they don't give you a demonstration, ask for one. Ask,
Right.
some fulfillment centers will even give you trial access to one with some test data, just
Brilliant.
so you can see how it works. The next thing is the fulfillment center's customer services team is crucial. You want to know reliably how responsive they are, because
Mhm.
some fulfillment centers are excellent. They will get back to any kind of emails like that within an hour and a half, 2 hours. A lot of them will actually give you a direct line to someone on that team, so that if there's something urgent you can call them. But
Okay.
equally, a lot of them won't. We've actually picked up a lot of customers just because they're sick of waiting like 3 days, 4 days, getting stuck in email ticketing systems before they hear back from a fulfillment
Yeah.
center. And that's not ideal. If you've got something urgent, then you need to be able to get in touch with someone that day. So those are the
Yeah.
two things.
And it speaks to exactly what you, yeah, what you've covered today is exactly that. It's that it's knowing the questions to ask when you go into meeting with the fulfillment center. So it's that, like, am I going to be able to reach a human? Because your reputation is everything, particularly if you're in that luxury end of the market. And so if someone calls and adds to their order or something, you want to be able to call someone and be able to make that edit quickly, that it's not missed because that day's orders are being processed. So that's really key, that customer service and customer relationship management element.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Fiacre. Sorry.
No, of course. Next one then, I spoke a little bit about technology and visibility earlier, and actually just now as well with the
Mm.
portal. But aside from just, day-to-day management, it's some brands use the tech side as a major advantage, and it's something that a lot of people will sleep on. So, like, a warehouse management system is a massive investment. If a company is keeping things in-house, usually inevitably they have to kind of invest in one, and they're very high cost. But for growing brands, they give you a lot of really valuable data. So it's like live inventory levels, tracking orders, automated billing, reporting. The reason this matters is the well-established brands, like really kind of leading ones, they are using this data constantly to spot top selling SKUs before they go out of stock, tracking slow moving ones and avoiding kind of overstocking, monitoring pick and ship times to keep on top of service standards. They're using it to forecast inventory needs ahead of peak periods. Essentially, it allows them to constantly have a resource to make data driven decisions and not just kind of work off gut feelings. The best thing about working with a 3PL is that you don't have to make that massive investment to get this. You're already plugged into it as part of the arrangement. So yeah, I mean, like, fulfillment will get your orders out the door, but the tech behind it will drive much better planning, stronger margins, and much faster growth. And I know I might be a little bit over time, so I'll go on to some of the final thoughts. So just to wrap up, what I'm hoping you've taken away from today is that fulfillment is not just about getting parcels out the door. When it's done right, it is a growth engine. Helps you protect your brand, it helps you improve customer experience, can help you scale into new channels or new regions or new marketplaces. And when it comes to fulfillment centers, a good fulfillment center shouldn't just handle operations. They should be an extension of your own team. They should be giving you back time, focus, and clarity, which are far more valuable than just the saved labor. But as with anything, with fulfillment centers or otherwise, success depends on clear expectations and good communication. Make sure your pricing, SLAs, returns are locked in and transparent. And most of all, think of fulfillment as something that should grow with your business and not hold it back.
Great, thanks for that, Fiacre. Now I have one last question, and it's just what regions are covered? EU, US, and UK. I know you've mentioned the UK earlier in the webinar, but are you covering each of those regions?
I mean, theoretically, any fulfillment center can ship anywhere in the world, but
Okay,
it's about whether or not you're going to be benefiting from local shipping rates. So, ourselves, we have locations in the UK and Ireland,
okay.
but there are other fulfillment centers who have a much wider reach. The thing to be aware of is if you're working with different fulfillment centers for different regions, make sure beforehand that you do understand their pricing and that you've got the volumes in place, because if you're splitting your order volume between two fulfillment centers, you're also not going to benefit from those high volume discounts from both. Like, if you have, I don't know, if you have 1,000 orders a month, then you've effectively just got two agreements for 500 orders a month, which means your picking rates may be higher.
Perfect. Okay, great. Yes. And the other question has been around like guideline pricing and everything, but I've just shared Fiacre's email address in the chat here as well. So you'll be able to reach out to Fiacre directly and get a sense of the pricing there. Thank you so much for your time and for the discussion this morning, Fiacre and Tom. It's been excellent to hear from the both of you and have a really great discussion on it. And thank you so much, Fiacre, for representing Autofulfill and giving an overview on a strategy towards fulfillment. It's been a great chat.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah,
Really
it
lovely.
was
Thank you
lovely.
all.
Thanks so
Cheers.
much.
We
Hopefully
enjoyed
all
having
our,
you, Fikra.
yeah, it was lovely. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Bye bye
everyone.
now.
All right. Bye bye.